Today on Locked On Canadiens, we revisit the 2024 draft with a couple weeks of hindsight.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1113 of Locked On Canadiens. We want to thank you all for making this your first listen of the day every day. As you know, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Laura Saab, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Matla of Habs Eyes on the Prize. Scott, how are you doing on this, what is still a really hot and humid day here in Montreal? And how about you guys?
Well, we've gone through 2 days of hurricane force rain, and this is the first day where it didn't just rain all day, but unfortunately, the humidity just refuses to go away. So no matter what shirt I'm wearing, things just stick to me, and I hate it. And this is why summer's the worst. And if you like summer, you're a terrible person, and I hate you.
Yes, why do you want us to be miserable?
I mean, I assume they want me to be miserable for a number of reasons, but this is a next level for that. Pretty good otherwise. I said it in yesterday's show that I'm kind of waiting for the deluge of Canadiens news now that they've had their AHL coach hired. I'm expecting Kent Hughes to kind of slowly start cranking things out here a little bit as we reach the middle of July at this point.
And speaking of that coach hire, there are some who are not happy about it. But Scott, as you pointed out, being an AHL coach and an NHL coach are two different things. And Pascal Vincent seems to be really good at the AHL level. And also you kind of have to look at context, right? Look at the team that he had, the injuries that they had, the fact that they're still fully in rebuild mode. And again, the injuries that he had, I don't think he inherited a great situation. So I don't think that we should read the Columbus adventure or Columbus experiment as to how the Rocket are going to go.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, is that I understand people are going to look at the most recent part that he was in, which was not good, even by his own admission. But I look at someone who, the minute he was let go, the general thought was this is a huge potential get for AHL teams here because he's been an established name there and he's done a lot at the junior level. This is not a guy who is unfamiliar with working with younger players and trying to get them to grow and hit the next level of their games in junior, as the GM, as the head coach, as an assistant coach, into the AHL as a head coach to an assistant coach, and now back again. I get that it is not sexy and new. And you know us that we don't love the retread idea all the time for coaching, but I think the Canadiens have done their due diligence in that I'm willing to trust the vision that Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes have, along with John Sedgwick as the AHL GM, for the guy they want behind the bench and someone that's familiar with the coaches that they have in place here. It's not so deep that it's going to be a problem. It's not like they're like, oh, Martin St. Louis is stepping away from the bench. Pascal Vincent is the new Canadiens head coach. That's not what's happening here. And obviously there's, maybe people like Jean-Francois Houle. I did, despite some of the hiccups in the overall presentation of the Rocket this past year, but I don't see this as a bad thing when pretty universally between people who cover other AHL teams or the AHL as a whole and people who cover teams in the Q and around Montreal and everything. This is a big win for that team. And we are, 2 months from probably rookie camp opening up here as we get closer and closer to that. So we're right around the corner from seeing what Pascal Vincent can do on the bench for the Rocket.
And that's going to be really, really important because the Canadiens prospects right now, this is a situation where they're going from, okay, we're in full rebuild to we're trying to start making progress at this point. And that's why we wanted to kind of look at the 2024 Canadiens draft with a couple of weeks of hindsight, but also because in our next segment, we've got a very special segment coming up from Sebastian High of Locked On NHL Prospects, and then we're going to play that for you. That's his recap of the Montreal draft of this year. And then tomorrow and then the next episode, we will have segments from him talking about the Canadiens prospect pool overall and the outlook for this season. But today we're going to talk specifically about the draft. And so it's been a couple weeks, Scott. The Montreal Canadiens fans have found things to disagree about, but somehow none of them seem to be about the draft. Everybody still seems to be quite happy with the job the Canadiens did.
I mean, it's hard not to be, is that they finally did the thing we wanted them to do last year in the 2023 draft and take a swing on the maybe slightly higher risk upside forward. And I'm not saying that Demidov is a high upside risk at all. He's high upside. I think the risk isn't nearly as much as Matvei Mishkov, but then they doubled down and went for Michael Hage in that first round. And they drafted a not native son, I guess, but son of a team legend in Atos Koivu that fans really like. And then they took a bunch of interesting swings around the rest of the draft there, that settling in, if we're looking at only their first round, it's a tremendous win for the Canadiens. But there's a lot of guys that they picked in this draft that I look at this and I go, there's things to be made out of these players. There's things to do in this. Owen Protz is one of those guys that comes in that it's a higher floor, lower ceiling kind of player, which not always the sexy pick, so to speak, like we talked about with back then. But they're guys that you can build a full core around, that this is your 5-6 defenseman, maybe your 7th defenseman on some teams there. And he comes in and all he does is make life a nightmare for other people. That's fantastic. Atos Koivu is one of the I believe he's the youngest prospect in the Canadian system right now. He just turned 18 at this point. And with that, there's still a guy who is growing and developing and turning into another player there that, yeah, maybe they didn't get Luke Misa or a Justin Poirier like many people would have wanted. But at the same time, there's someone who can grow here. There are guys with bases they can build on going forward.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because like the knock on that Koivu pick was that it was a bit of a reach and it was just for fan, it was just for fan goodwill, I guess. But what's wrong with that? I mean, Saku Koivu was so much beloved by the current fan base and the children of the current fan base. You know what I mean? So like he is a Montreal, I guess you could call him a legend. Like in
no, I will absolutely call Saku Koivu a legend. So
we could get, and to us he absolutely is a legend. But I know in Montreal, it's you have to win like 50 Stanley Cups or whatever. But at the same time, like he's still growing. By that I mean Atos Koivu, right? He's still growing. And there's a possibility that we haven't even scratched the surface of how much he can grow. Like, I'm not saying he's going to turn into an elite top line center. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that as a player, you could do worse than taking a reach on somebody who still has not even shown us what their potential ceiling could be.
And that's exactly it, is that I look at him and I look at a guy like Tyler Thorpe is the one that continues to just stick out to me, because I go, this is a dude he's big. He's a big dude, and there's a lot you can do with a guy who isn't just large, but has a skill base to build off of, that has smarts up here. Yeah, there are other guys I maybe would have preferred in some of the spots that they picked, but I look at those first 3, 4, 5 picks, Demidov, Hage, Koivu, Sawyer, Protz, and then even Thorpe beyond that. There's a lot that I like in each of these players here, and Hattie Kalakash did a good job breaking down some of these players in threads on Twitter coming back from the draft and whatnot on his flights. And there's a lot to really digest and like in these players, is that they're not just taking a random swing, is that they're betting on guys that they think they can improve the parts of the game they struggle with, or then that have such a base that they can build them up to that next level. And that's a lot of what Kent Hughes is banking on. It's what they've done the past couple of years, that they have projectable players. It's not a boom or bust. It is, we're going to make something out of this no matter what. I know that the 2022 draft was 2022. Yeah, 2022 draft was incredible with Slavkovsky and Machar and Beck and Hudson and Engstrom and all of that. you can't expect that every year. It's like expecting the Habs to pull off a 2007 where you got Subban, Pacioretty, and McDonough all in one draft, plus Yannick Weber, etc. They're building a lot of very projectable players that they can improve on. And if you're drafting a guy and you can improve him enough that he becomes an NHL player, even if he was picked 5th, 6th round where the odds are slim, you're doing a really good job in your player development program. And that's what fans should be looking at. And that's what we've been screaming at for years, to develop that part of the organization even more.
And in our next segment, you're immediately going to see Sebastian High and the segment that he did on this year's NHL draft. And then once we're done with that, Scott and I will discuss what he said and what our thoughts are. But you're in for a real treat because we've got all 3 segments from Sebastian High that are going to run on the next couple of episodes. So stay tuned for that. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. How often, I'm talking about the sports that aren't happening and it's the summer, and how often you just say, I just missed my sports. I want them back so badly. There is Major League Baseball, but also you're in for a real treat because FanDuel is letting me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long, whether it's MLB, whether it's anything else. I guess the Derby is happening too. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer just like I am. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
So the Montreal Canadiens, this is the NHL team that I'm most familiar with, having grown up in Montreal. And they have been absolutely hoarding prospects for about the last half decade at this point. And the 2024 NHL draft class was no exception to that. And while a lot of their depth selections in that draft class were very much the swings on their guys, rather than the guys that public scouts or public rankings had very high up in the draft, their first round selection gave this draft class an immediate A or A+ grade for me. They had the best day one of any team, in my opinion, even though they had some stark competition there. The Calgary Flames landing Zane Parekh was fantastic, as well as the Minnesota Wild getting Zeev Buium at 12th overall. But the raw upside that was acquired by the Montreal Canadiens there on draft day in Las Vegas was unrivaled, in my opinion. At 5th overall, they got, for me, the second best player in this draft class by a long shot. Ivan Demidov has been a lock at number 2 on my personal rankings going back to July of last year, and he never budged. He was, to the end, a bit closer to number 1 than he was to number 3 in my list. I think that this is a player with absolutely game-breaking upside. The puck handling is the best that I've ever scouted, and he can break open a game at any time, and he has the combination of confidence and intelligence and awareness to make that happen and to use his line mates intelligently to create high-end offensive chances. His off-puck movement is elite. He's able to find soft ice. He has excellent habits on his rotations in the offensive zone. And while, yes, we have almost exclusively only seen him play at the MHL level, which is a subpar junior league there in Russia, probably a lot closer to like the J20 in Sweden or the U20 in Finland than it is to any CHL league, even the QMJHL. Still, the high-end skill here is impossible to deny. I think Ivan Demidov has the upside to be the most impactful skater the Montreal Canadiens have had this millennium, and I don't think that that's overly a stretch either. The upside is utterly fantastic. He is able to combine that elite level skill with elite level intelligence and some fantastic habits on both sides of the puck. He has a high motor. He gets to the dangerous areas. He's able to read defensive structures and find incredibly creative solutions to the problems he encounters. And even at the MHL level, he was finding ways to challenge himself, despite being a 2-point-a-game player who was just far too good for that environment last season. He was able to challenge himself by finding complex solutions to the relatively simple problems that you encounter on a game-to-game basis in that league. And I really think he was still able to round out his game and explore his own game at that level, which required a lot of intelligence and creativity to do. So one of the players that I've been most excited by in watching in the past couple drafts, and I think that give him a year's time and he's going to be a fantastic professional player in North America. Whether he needs 1 year in the AHL to adapt or not remains to be seen. I think if he plays the entirety of this upcoming season still at the MHL level, immediately jumping from there to the NHL would be a big leap, but maybe having half a season in the AHL between that could really help him adapt to the North American game and be an impactful top 6 piece out of the gate for the Montreal Canadiens. At 21st overall, they picked another fantastic player in Michael Hague, a player that was really jumping between my 12th overall and 18th overall slots for most of the tail end of the draft year. This is a guy that has elite level skill. I think he's one of the players that also was able to improve the most as the season went on, and beyond just the on ice like improvements that he did, whether it be increased ability in his defensive sequences and applying pressure, or being able to leverage his high degree of offensive intelligence and like elite level offensive tools, from his skating to his puck handling to his creativity and his shot to create offense. But also in terms of the off ice components, it's not at all surprising that this is a player who had a bit of a slow start last draft year season, because he lost his father in the offseason. There was an incredible amount of emotion going into it, and he missed almost his entire draft -1 season to injury. There was an incredible amount of adversity that this young man had to go through, and to do what he did at the USHL level, dragging a Chicago Steel team throughout the back half of the season as probably the best player in the entire USHL in that back half. Just very impressive things. And to be drafted by his childhood team, the Montreal Canadiens, just makes it all the more poetic. And he's off to a fantastic development program at the University of Michigan. I think this is a player that has high-end top 6 potential. I think there's first-line upside here if he really hits. And I think to add that type of profile at the 21st overall selection is tremendous value. And the Montreal Canadiens did really, really nicely to trade up from 26th overall to the 21st overall slot, because Michael Hague would not have fallen down to 26. And the gap between him and the other forwards that would have been available at 26th overall was significant. And yeah, that was the day one. And by that point, in my eyes, the Montreal Canadiens had already hit a home run at the 2024 draft class. And everything beyond that was just a bonus. But on day 2, they still made some really interesting swings. They went for an interesting player in Atos Koivu in the 3rd round, who obviously is the son of Saku Koivu. He's an intelligent two-way centerman with some really good defensive zone habits. He has a really hard shot. He's a good half-wall shooter. I still have a lot of questions about his projection to the pro ranks, but he was able to really develop so much in his draft year season that projection could be really interesting long-term. He was playing U18 Finland junior hockey at the beginning of last season and ended up playing some games in Liga by the end of the year, which is a tremendous a gap in quality of competition to rise up through. And I think that there is definitely an NHL future for him if he's able to continue to fill out his frame, refine his habits, find his niche in being an impactful offensive player. I think the shot is really good. I don't know if it's going to carry him into a second line role, but as a potential middle 6 two-way centerman with a variety of interesting habits on both sides of the puck, and obviously the hockey lineage, I think that Koivu was an interesting selection, even though it was a little bit higher than I would have swung on him. But clearly the Habs are in love with this player, and their new like a European player development person in the organization is also based in the same city where Koivu's playing. So you're going to get a lot of hands-on development time for this player, which I think is going to serve him really, really well. And his work ethic is fantastic as well. So interesting player, interesting swing in the third round. The next player they picked in the third round was Logan Sawyer, a high motor, really skilled offensive winger who played in the AJHL and BCHL for the Brooks Bandits last season, a team that swapped leagues in the middle of the year. And he was a player that popped off in every single viewing that I had. He always stood out when he was on the ice, constantly trying to leverage his skill and intensity and intelligence to create offense on a consistent basis. The defensive habits are still going to need a little bit of improvement, but he's off to Providence College in the NCAA, which is a program that does a lot of work on refining defensive habits in their players. And I think that Logan Sawyer is going to be in really good hands in that program. Owen Protz, the fourth round selection for the Montreal Canadiens, is an incredibly violent left shot defenseman who played for the Brantford Bulldogs in the OHL last season. And he's really intelligent with how he leverages that violence as well. He picks and chooses his spots, but when he wants to go in for a hit, he goes all in. A very fun player on the defensive side of the puck that I think the Montreal Canadiens are rather happy to have in the same organization that's developed both Jack-Eye brothers as well. Later on in the draft, the Habs went and swung on Tyler Thorpe, a 6'5", 212-pound right winger who scored 44 points in 51 games for the Vancouver Giants in the WHL as a D+1. A massive frame, pretty good curl and drag shot off the rush. Interesting frame to swing on. Mikos Vekvanags is an interesting goaltender that the Habs drafted as well. He played 9 games in the Latvian Pro League last season where he put up a .908 save percentage, and he's 6'3". He's off to Acadie Bathurst in the QMJHL this upcoming season where he'll be getting some more hands-on work as well from the Habs development staff by being nearby, relative to Latvia at least. And an interesting swing to take on a goaltender. They also picked Ben Merrill, a 6'4", 194-pound centerman with a really hard shot, who was playing U.S. high school hockey last season, where he logged 37 points in 25 games for St. Sebastian's, and he's off to Penticton in the BCHL before he's going to make that leap to the NCAA the year afterwards. One of my favorite late-round picks for the Habs was Makar Kanin, a dynamic and really, really fun offensive winger. He's a D+1 right wing. He's 6 feet, 161 pounds, and he scored 27 points in 35 VHL games, which is Russia's second-tier pro league. I call it the AHL of Russia, even though the quality of play is significantly lower than the AHL is, obviously. But still, to be playing at that level as a dynamic, undersized 19-year-old, 18, 19-year-old, and to be flashing the level of skill and entertainment and creativity that he did, there's a reason that Nick Bobrow called him Demidov Light in his post-draft interview. And the last pick of the draft is another draft +1 player, 6'2" left shot defenseman Rasmus Bergqvist, who was playing in the J20 Nacional last season in Sweden, and he logged 12 points in 36 games. He's a smooth skating two-way defenseman. Wasn't on my personal list in terms of my rankings, but a player that the Habs clearly like in terms of his intelligence and his potential as a potential bottom pair guy long term. But that wraps up the 2024 draft breakdown.
And we'll be talking about what we just heard in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Indeed. When you're hiring, you absolutely need to make sure that you find the best person. It's not about searching, it's about matching. And you can do that with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. It helps you find quality candidates fast. You can use Indeed to schedule, screen, message, all kinds of ways of connecting with the right candidate for you. It doesn't even just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And I can tell you that hiring is so hard. It's really about finding the exact right person for your role. And Indeed does all the busy work for you. All you have to do is match with the right candidate and then be happy with your hire. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And it's time to talk about what we just heard. I think the most interesting thing that I heard from Sebastian is when he's talking about Michael Hagan saying he has top line potential, because that's not one that I had heard. Most people are projecting him to be in the middle six, right? And if he does end up fulfilling that potential, to me, that is a massive steal. I know we called him a steal earlier, and people are like, why are you calling him a steal if the Habs traded up to get him? It's because you're getting a player who could have gone top 15 at 21. Like, that's why we're calling him a steal. Like, that potential is there. Now, we have to manage our expectations, and I think that's very clear. But personally, and Demidov is also a steal. I mean, the Canadiens got him at 5th overall, not 2nd, 5th overall. But I think, that pick at 21 is really one where the Canadiens found a lot of value.
Yeah, and here's the thing about a player being a potential top 6 player. Every part of his toolkit relays itself to that. In that, if you've read his profile in the Elite Prospects guides or Hockey Prospect and read, all the skills that he has there, he has all the pieces in that toolkit to be a top 6 player. We're not saying immediately he's a top 6 player, he's a top 6 winger, or he's a top 6 center. That's not fully guaranteed what spot they're playing, or a top line, I should say. Top 6, I think, is absolutely a potential thing here. And he is a steal. This is someone that people thought, like you said, might go in the top 15 here. He's someone that I really liked and that Kent Hughes and the Canadiens traded up for. If he was gone, they were going to trade that pick for whatever package they got there, or in a trade for maybe another player there. But when Hage wasn't picked, they're like, nope, that's our guy. This is someone they had their eyes on. And Demidov, absolutely, you can say, I don't know if you can say steal of the draft, but I definitely think that in terms of teams who kind of lucked out and other teams doing whatever, hello Anaheim and Beckett Seneca, the Canadiens got a guy who in most draft years probably would have been the first overall pick. And debatably, if he was able to play more KHL games, without the dispute between SKA and himself because he doesn't want to sign a new deal, does that shift him and Celebrini? Is that some people will say no, that Celebrini was always going to go number 1, but like Sebastian said there, he is closer to 1 than he is 3 in this draft. And it wasn't so much a top rated 1 prospect. I think it was a lot closer, and the Canadiens made the most of their draft capital. Yeah, there are some interesting guys and maybe some other pieces that I would have liked them to pick. We talked about Poirier and Misa and previously, but getting a guy like Hage is one, he's a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. He's 190 pounds. So people who love that size thing, there's something for all of you in this draft. There's a physical defenseman with legitimate good defensive skills. You have extreme high-end talent in your 2 top first-round picks there. And then Atos Koivu, who is continuing to grow and learn, someone that I'm probably the most interested to watch develop this year because I think there's a huge baseline there. This is, again, not quite 2022, where I think the Canadiens had arguably the best draft of anybody there, but this is definitely a step up from last year with just such an emphasis on we're going for talent and projectable talent, not just hoping and praying. And they believe in their development system to really get these players to that point.
Yes, and I want to talk a little bit about Logan Sawyer, because for me, he's somebody that I find extremely intriguing, because it feels like he's the type of player that it could go either way. He could overreach his potential and then be a true NHLer, a bona fide NHLer, or he could be like a career AHLer, right? So, and I for whatever reason, I keep calling him Logan Stanley, and I know that name like makes Scott very, very angry. It's almost like hearing the name of the coward Mark Scheifele. But yes, so like to me, like that's the one that I'm going to be watching. But we have more from Sebastian that we're going to be incorporating into our next few episodes. But guess what? Next episode is our mailbag episode. I already have some questions. We will be talking about trade trees. I'm very excited about that topic. I've been reading up on them. And at the same time, please make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. As we said, we are free and available. And also always check out our sister shows. Like there's a really funny episode from Locked On Flyers that dropped yesterday. Check that out. Check out Locked On NHL Prospects with Sebastian and Hattie. They're fantastic. And email us at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. You can also leave questions in the YouTube comments. You can also tweet us at LO_Canadians. You'll find Scott on Twitter at Scott Matla. You'll find me at The Active Stick. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time.